We're looking at a transatlantic Titanic, and I think the iceberg may have just been sighted. How did relations between the world's best and strongest friends go south so badly and so quickly? Well, my guest tonight says that the spoiler lives right here in Berlin. I'm joined by the U.S. author and journalist James Kirchig. His latest article in Foreign Policy says that Germany's Chancellor Merkel has bungled the relationship with U.S. President Trump, a holier-than-thou approach to geopolitics that doesn't always work. And the result, a Merkel-Trump alliance that produces a reluctant, awkward handshake at best. Jamie, it's good to have you back here on the show, back here at the big table. I mean, is it really all Angela Merkel's fault?
No, I mean, certainly Donald Trump is probably the American president who's challenged the values of the transatlantic relationship more than any other president. He's a very difficult person, clearly, to deal with. But it's not just Chancellor Merkel I would blame here. I really think it's the German elites are being hysterical, frankly, and overreacting.
What do you mean when you say hysterical, overreacting?
Well, declaring this the end of the transatlantic alliance, the end of the West. If you look at the cover of Spiegel with Donald Trump giving a middle finger, I mean, you know, every couple of years there's a cover of Spiegel where, you know, there's the NSA scandal or there's the Iraq War. I mean, there's this sort of periodic episodes when there are differences between the United States and Europe. You have particularly Germans go crazy, if I could say.
Well, we've got the cover of Spiegel. We can pull that up so our viewers can see in case they haven't seen that. I mean, basically what you're seeing is Germany and Europe giving what? The finger to Trump. But, I mean, it's not all the elites, right? I mean, there have been two schools of thoughts, right? That the U.S., the transatlantic partnership as we know it is over. Europe has to, you know, be independent.
Right.
And then there are others who say, hold your nose, wait it out, it will pass.
The more responsible voices are saying that because, let's be honest, there's no plan B for Europe. Europe cannot be an independent pole in international affairs. Europe cannot maintain its own security. It can't maintain the liberal world order that it loves to speak of so much. It's not going to be able to compete against China. It's not going to be able to resist Russia. It's not going to be able to deal with the chaos in the Middle East if it's not working with the United States.
Well, you know, a lot of people watching are going to say the United States can't do that either, i.e., Trump possible collusion in the U.S. election, right?
Well, that hasn't been proven yet.
Right.
We have an investigation looking into it. I think both sides need each other. They both need each other, and they have to work together. And yes, Donald Trump is a very difficult person. I didn't support him. He's presenting massive challenges. But I think rather than attack the U.S. president in the United States so much, perhaps Europeans should be looking at, well, what can we do to bring pressure on Iran, for instance, instead of...
Let me ask you about, let's stick with Angela Merkel for just a second. In the last year, the U.S. president and the German chancellor, they went 12 weeks in a row without one single phone call. Now, that was the first time, the longest time, according to the German government and the White House, in more than 40 years that a German chancellor and a U.S. president have gone that long without speaking. Who should have picked up the phone first there?
Well, it's like any marriage that has difficulties, right? Clearly, I think, look, Donald Trump attacked Angela Merkel on the campaign trail more than any other world leader.
And he and with things that were not true, we have to say,
he said all sorts of nutty stuff.
Okay,
and I give the chancellor credit that I think she was willing to look past that when, after he won. But they're just fundamentally different people with different worldviews, and she's made that abundantly clear, and he's made that abundantly clear. But at the end of the day, Germany and America have far more in common than they do that separates them. And they have far more interests in common and values in common.
But don't you think the German chancellor, don't you think she really believes that? And couldn't you argue she believes that much more than Donald Trump does? He attacked her. He's attacked the EU. He's attacked NATO. He's attacked everything that represents that friendship.
I think people need to sometimes distinguish between his rhetoric and the actions. I mean, you just mentioned Russia earlier. You know, it's Germany that's going through with the Nord Stream 2 pipeline against the wishes of all of its Eastern European allies, against the legal complaints of the European Commission. So, you know, Germans are really not in the place to be talking or lecturing the United States about policies towards Russia or maintaining the liberal world order when they're doing so much to undermine that liberal world order in Europe itself.
I want you to take a listen now to a soundbite from a man by the last name of Chertoff. He used to be head of Homeland Security in the United States. He and a European sitting together in Washington. Take a look.
So what this commission is about is taking a bipartisan and transatlantic approach to taking the steps we need to begin to inoculate ourselves against these efforts. And I emphasize the bipartisan and transatlantic nature because this is not about one party benefiting and one party losing. Everybody loses.
Now, that was just last week. Can you imagine U.S. President Donald Trump suggesting that commission and pushing for it to exist?
No, of course not, because I think he understands that he benefited from the Russian interference in our election, and he can't bring himself to admit that anyone was responsible for his incredible, fabulous, amazing election victory other than Donald J. Trump. So he's not going to acknowledge that the Russians interfered to help his campaign. This is something he's not going to ever be able to do, I think.
Okay, well, let's stick with Angela Merkel for a moment. Today, the German Chancellor delivered a speech on her government's draft budget before Parliament. She also devoted some of her time, believe it or not, to foreign policy and efforts to save the Iran nuclear deal. Take a listen.
But the one question we have to answer, and that we already have answered, in opposition to the United States: is there a stronger level of dialogue if one abandons the deal, or is the dialogue stronger if one remains in the deal? We believe that by not leaving the Iran deal, it will be easier to continue talks, which we must do, ladies and gentlemen, because the ballistic missile program is a great danger, most specifically for Israel.
All right, our political correspondent, Kate Brady, she joins us now. She has been following the debate in the German parliament. Kate, we've been talking about this transatlantic ties. It seems even when she is in her own parliament, in front of her own government, speaking to her home audience, Angela Merkel cannot escape Donald Trump.
She certainly can't. But the transatlantic relationship was just one of several international topics that Merkel touched upon today during that debate, which, as you mentioned, was actually about Germany's new budget. But she did take the chance today to really reiterate her stance that the transatlantic relationship remains important to Germany, despite what Merkel described as difficult days since Trump announced that the US would be withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal. But at the same time, she did also underline Germany's commitment today with the UK and France to upholding the Iran nuclear deal. She
doesn't want to give up the transatlantic relationship, but you say she hasn't done it any favors when it comes to Trump. Do you think that Merkel should be more like Emmanuel Macron? Would the transatlantic relationship look better if she had more of the French Macron magic?
It's very difficult because she's German and she's representing the German public, and the German public is not willing to give their chancellor the same sort of latitude in dealing with a very unpopular American president. Whereas in France, they have their own security capability, they have their own nuclear weapons, they're a much more independent nation in terms of foreign policy. The French public is willing to let their president, go to Washington and make a show and be really nice to Donald Trump and, slap him on the back and be really friendly. It's harder for her to do that.
But that's her personality, though. I mean, Kate, what do you think? Don't you think the Germans would also accept it if their chancellor tried to be, more bromancy with Trump if they thought it was going to help, save the Iran nuclear deal, for example?
There really isn't any support as such for Trump in Germany, and we saw that ahead of the US election, and you just aren't going to see that same bromance, as you say, or relationship between Merkel and Trump. It's just not there. As you said, they're two very different personalities, and regardless of which world leader Merkel is addressing, she is her own person, and she's always been very measured in her responses, and always thinks everything through. She's not going to make any rash decisions.
Yeah, it's known as the Merkel method, and her opponents say that method led to the rise of the far-right AfD, which is now in the German parliament. Would you say that Angela Merkel is partly responsible for the rise of that party?
Well, Franz Josef Strauss, who was the former leader of the CSU, famously said that there should be no Democratic Party to the right of the Christian Democrats in Germany. Right. Yeah. And that was really the responsibility of Christian Democrats in Germany to ensure that they were sort of the catch-all for conservative voters. And it's clear that Angela Merkel failed in that test. Now, whether or not she had a choice, people can debate that. You know, presented with this massive crisis on her hands, you know, should she have let in the refugees or not? But I think whatever you think of the justice of that decision, you can't deny the negative consequences of it across Europe and the rise of populist far-right parties across Europe.
Yeah, well, they are in Parliament, and the language they use is certainly something we're not used to here in Germany. I want you to take a listen now to what the AfD leader, Alice Weidel, what she had to say today about the budget, also about minorities and immigrants in Germany, and then what the response was to her language. Take a listen.
If you live in a country that might penalise you for fishing without a licence, but not for crossing the border illegally without a valid passport, then you would be right in saying this country is governed by idiots. I can tell you that neither burqas nor girls wearing headscarves nor knife-wielding men on welfare and all the other good-for-nothings will not help secure our prosperity, economic growth and certainly not our welfare state.
My colleague, Ms. Weidel, in your speech you use terms like headscarf girls and other good-for-nothings, and such talk won't be tolerated here. With that, you discriminate against all women wearing headscarves. I am calling you to order.
I mean, that sounds like a parliament Donald Trump would feel at home in.
Someone should give her a show on American talk radio. She sounds really prepared for that.
Well, she's prepared for that. But, I mean, did Angela Merkel, she didn't really respond to that, did she? I mean...
She really did. I mean, she gave a 30-minute address to Parliament, and not once did she refer back to what Alice Weidel said at all. And it seems that that's the way that Parliament is generally going. This was a big question back in September. How is Parliament going to deal with the AfD being in Parliament? Especially after Gauland came out, one of the co-leaders of the AfD came out and said that he was going to hunt the government.
Hunt her down.
Hunt her down and hound the government. And so there really were big questions about how the AfD were going to behave. But of course, we can see already there Wolfgang Schäuble, the president of the Bundestag, is already calling Alice Weidel into order today. So there are marks which even the AfD can't overstep. But it seems that Merkel kind of took the decision today to not even warrant them a response.
I mean, you know, there is the Merkel method, and then there is Donald Trump. We'll get back to... We started with him, we're going to end with him. Jamie, you tweeted earlier this year, everything that Trump says makes sense when you just preface it with this. Donald from Queens, New York, you're on the air. So if we just think of it as all a show when he's performing, you say it doesn't feel as bad.
I think Germans look at Trump and they see you-know-who. And I think that's the wrong way to look at him. I don't see the Third Reich when I see Donald Trump. I see the fall of Rome. I see Caligula. I see decadence. I see a clown. I see a TV game show host, which is sad in its own way and depressing and tragic, but it's not, fascism come to America.
Well, we're not going to play the violin or the fiddles while the studio burns tonight. To both of you, James Kirchig and Kate Brady, thank you very much. It's a good discussion on Donald Trump and Angela Merkel. Thank you.